What's up, everybody? I am back and I am talking to one of the most exciting strawweight prospects in the entire country. I think she is so good. I named her my 2022 North American MMA Prospect of the Year, and she joins me today, Miss Glory Watson. Glory, always a pleasure to have you back. This is like the third or fourth one of these that we've done, but I anointed you. I anointed you with my sacred oils, and I said, right, that you're the 2022 MMA Prospect of the Year. I know that award changed your life, like infinite amounts of cereals. Joe Rogan's in your DMs now. It's a whole new life. You're welcome.
It means the world. Everything is just so much different now.
It is. It is. I know. I know. Like you are in the like elite levels of MMA royalty, thanks to yours truly. So you're
Yes.
welcome. You're welcome.
But honestly, like it was like I saw it and I was like, oh my gosh, oh my gosh. It's like makes your heart so happy. You're like, because being validated for that stuff, even it's not like UFC champion of the world, but it's like the people that are watching me think I'm good. And it's great. It's a great feeling.
Well,
So thank you.
you know what, you are very welcome, and I'll peel back the onion because I got a lot of questions, as you can imagine, about like, well, Mr. Tyler, how did you come up with this prestigious award? And I was just like, okay, well, it's activity. I want to know like how often you're able to go into the cage, and most importantly, for me anyway, it's like, well, who are you getting wins over? Because if you have to fight people like me, then whatever. That's you should be able to smoke me in like 10 seconds. So it's like, what is the caliber of people that you're fighting? Like, who are these opponents? Who are these girls that they're bringing in? And I look at your 2022, and I was completely blown away because I felt like the caliber of girls that you had to go up against last year was something completely that was just different levels of difficulty. And to really have an appreciation and understanding of the girls that you fought, you really would have to do your homework on your opponents. I'm pretty familiar with most of the girls that you fought, but Gloria, I wanted to ask you, when you unpack your 2022, like what are some of the more memorable moments for you?
Oh geez. That's a hard question to because it's not something I really think about. So I guess honestly, there were quite a few moments in 2022 that were felt like super lows, and then I had super highs. And I think ultimately that what has come out of 2022 for me has been a change in focus a little bit. Not at all moving away from fighting, but moving away from the physical side of fighting in terms of every single day I go to the gym, I work my ass off, I do all of the things I'm told. But when it comes to the mental side of things, I kind of set that on the side.
Mm-hmm.
So 2022 for me, there were a lot of moments where the mental side of things made things a lot easier or they made things a lot more difficult. So I really, this year is a lot of going to be a lot of mental training as well as the physical to try to make them combine together to be the best athlete that I can be.
This game that you play, the amount of like admiration and respect I have for all competitors. I don't care if you're an amateur fighter and you're 0 and 500. That makes no difference to me, because you have to make that walk and you have to prepare. And then there's people at your level, like there's a dwindling amount of people that actually get to the level that you're at already. And you've been doing this for a number of years now. Like you've had quite a bit of cage experience. You had an amateur career where you did really really well, and now here you are in your pro career. And like when you like kind of like pan out and like think about all that stuff, the 2018 Glory that like walked into the cage and was getting ready to crush everybody in amateurs, like when you like think back about that all these years later, like what would you tell that girl that's getting ready to like make that walk for the first time in 2018? What are some
Um,
of the biggest lessons that you've learned over your journey?
okay, so no guarantees I'm not going to cry when I say this. Okay,
Okay.
so I've been working a lot with a gentleman from the academy in Portland, Maine. His name is Paul Gorman, and his head coach Jay Jack. I've worked a lot with them, and Paul had a very accomplished career. He fought a lot. He fought some fantastic fighters, but he struggled a lot with the mental side.
Mm-hmm.
And coach actually asked him the same question question, what if you could go back and tell yourself something when you first started, what would you say? And it really resonated with me. I'm definitely going to cry. Oh, I've never cried in an interview before. I think that I would tell that version of me that you are good enough. Because I think that's what everyone needs to hear, especially from yourself. Yeah. So I think that would be the thing.
And it's like, I think the fighting is just so intimate and like revealing. You reveal yourself, and it's not only like to the people like me that watch, but it's like there's this more like intimate kind of sort of connection that you have with your opponent, and it's very strange because you're trying to like basically like beat the hell out of each other, but then there's a lot of truth in fighting. It's like you found out about something that really can't be explained. The only person that you have that connection with is that person that you shared the cage with, right? And I just think that's like one of the moments, like as soon as these fights end, regardless of like the beefs that got built up or whatever it is, it's like there's like that mutual respect, regardless of what ended up transpiring in the cage or whatever ended up leading up to that fight. It's like, okay, we did it, and I don't know, that fog lifts and it clears, and it's just like, I think you probably learned a lot about yourself, but also about that other person. That's just kind of like a really special moment.
Yeah, I think a lot of times when fights are happening, there is a point where you are at you're competing, so you don't want to admit it, but you are at your most vulnerable. Yeah. You are at a point where you are under a very high stress situation, not necessarily the thought of winning and losing, but the constant like the pressure that you get from the other person and from yourself. So I think that a lot of the things that we kind of guard ourselves with get stripped away because we don't have time to think about those things and keep those there. So I think that a lot of the reason the respect is there is you're in this position, and both athletes have worked so hard and sacrificed so much to be there, that when all that is stripped away and then the fight ends, there's that respect, like, you did it. You, like, no matter what happens, we went in and we put everything out there. You put everything on the altar, and to like come out the end of that, especially with another person who has that respect, it's a phenomenal feeling, and it is very enlightening about yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think like one of the other things that is really like so interesting about fighting is the connection between like the actual fighters and then like the people that support them, right? So it's like and I think of you right away, like when I think of like people that are fighting like in their hometown, and like the people that buy all these tickets and come out to see you perform. Like I'm sure whether you're out there like pumping gas in your car the next day, or you're picking up a pizza, or you're in the grocery store, whatever, like there's that somebody who's gonna like come up to you and be like, I watched you fight, like my daughter watched you fight, she loved it, now she's doing like karate or taekwondo, and like that's got to be the mark that you make like on other people's lives. Like to you it's just like, oh sweet, yeah, now I'm 5-1, I'm such a badass, or whatever it is. But then your impact is so much more. It goes beyond like whatever it says in the record books. It goes beyond the Contender Series or UFC or all that other stuff. Like, don't get me wrong, all that stuff's amazing. But like when you think about like the impact that you're making in your local community, like does that ever like I don't know if you ever really get used to that. And I've always been wanting to ask you, like when you're out and about, like going to the grocery store or whatever it is that you're doing in your normal life, like when people come up to you and they tell you like, my daughter saw you fight, and it really inspired her to like want to like go out there and do karate or taekwondo or whatever it is, like does that kind of like still blow you away after all this time?
Yes, it's almost like a proud parent moment where you're like, oh, I like this young child or even an adult wants to do something amazing because of something they saw me do. And so it is like this feeling of empowerment in that regard, but it's just a feeling of what's the word I'm looking for? Kind of just giving back to people, I guess, and that it's just your heart is so full because of it.
Mhm.
but it is really weird being recognized in places. Like, I was at the chiropractor and someone came up to me like, "Hey, I watched you fight. Can we get a picture?" I'm like, "Sure, I guess I'd love to." Like, I'm not gonna say no, but
Right.
it's weird. It is
It
weird being
is.
recognized. But I talk to a lot of people that, because I am from a small town, or smaller, I guess, I see a lot of people that I like went to high school with, or my younger sister went to high school with,
Right.
and they'll like come up and they'll let you get like the hand on the shoulder, like, "You're doing real good." I'm like, "Thanks." I'm like, I barely remember your name, but I really appreciate it. But
Yeah.
it is weird, like, leaving that mark, even,
Yeah.
and it is something, so it's a very niche or irregular type of thing. It's
Right.
not like a typical thing that most men or women do.
Mhm.
So it's really cool.
It is. It's really really weird. I went to a fight one time. Only time it's ever happened to me. I went to a fight. I went to a CFFC fight, and in between fights, I think I went to get like a beer or something. And I'm like going back to my seat, and there's this guy's like, "Tyler, man, I love your show." I'm like, "What the fuck?" Like, I'm just like, and I was just like, "Thanks, man. Like, thank you." And I wasn't asked to take an awkward selfie, thankfully, but like the guy like fist bumped me, like, "Hey, man, I love your show, Mom's Basement." I'm like, "What the fuck is happening right now?" Like,
It's
where
cool though. Like, it's
it's
weird and it's
it,
cool.
it is weird and it's cool, right? And then I told my wife, I get back down, and she like kind of saw it, and she was just like, "Oh, is that one of your fans?" I was like, I don't know. Don't say that. That's weird,
I
right?
know. You're
Really.
building a fan base.
Not. You know what though? I'd rather see you build up your fan base. I'm okay being that anonymous figure. You don't need to know who I am. Only the fighters do. It's very strange, and I don't know. It's just, but cool and validating in a way, because you
Yes.
put so much time and work into it,
Mm-hmm.
and after a while, it's just like you take that obscurity and privacy for granted. And I know I do. And then, for that to happen, yes, it was cool, but it's also like, holy shit, people are paying attention. Right. And I'm
Yeah.
sure you can identify with that.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, definitely. But I definitely have those days where I'm like, I have to go to the grocery store. I don't want to talk to anybody. I hope no one recognizes me. I'm just going to look down the whole time.
You got to
But
put on those big glasses and like a beanie or something,
yes.
or a
Well,
wig.
a hat is a bad look on my head. I don't know. It's weird. I've never like looked good in a hat.
I think
My
you could.
my friend Kira was like, "You should not wear hats." I'm like, "Yeah, I should not wear hats."
Well,
It's not good.
one thing about her, in my interactions with her, she will tell you the truth, whether you want to hear it or not. And I
Mm-hmm.
appreciate that.
Oh yeah.
You
Oh
always
yeah.
you need one person like that. You need at least one. I don't know if I'd say like you need 5 or 10 of them, because that that might be a little much. But no, she's amazing, and I wanted to shift gears a little bit,
Yes.
and I
Sure.
wanted to talk about just kind of like this like build up. You're going to be fighting Hilarie Rose at NEF 51 here in a couple weeks. You have a habit of fighting my friends. I don't really know why you insist on doing this, but
I do it on purpose.
I
I'm
know
just
you
like,
do.
who does Tyler like the most?
I'm going to fight her. Yeah, exactly. But I will say this. When I think of Hilarie, I think of New England MMA. Right? Like, I think of, there's a short list of people I think about. And she's on that list. And for many years, when you think of like the female fighters in New England, it's like she's like one of the first people, if you're paying attention, that you're going to talk about. And I've been a fan of hers, and I've been admiring what she's been able to do for such a long amount of time. And in the back of my mind, I always kind of thought to myself, like, these two are probably going to fight at some point. Like, I've been like, especially after your year and what you've been able to accomplish and the trajectory and how everything's been going, in the back of my mind, I'm like, this fight's going to happen. I don't know where it's going to happen. I don't know when, but it's going to happen. Boom, NEF, they make that announcement. And I'm like, here we fucking go. So I wanted to ask you, how did this fight come together? Was that also something that was kind of in the back of your mind? Like, were you kind of mentally preparing for the inevitable? I should say, because I'm sure you probably felt the same.
Yeah. So when I first started, I believe I started in 2017, if I remember correctly, is when I started training.
Mm-hmm.
And Hilarie had already been fighting for 2 or 3 years at that point.
Right.
So I, as a woman, I knew her name. I knew she had. I believe when I was coming on the scene, she was still an amateur or at the very tail end of her amateur career and fought for the NEF, the strawweight title and won.
Mm-hmm.
And it's kind of like one of those things where like I saw it and I was like, that's amazing. Like I wanted to do that.
Right.
So it's not it's a feeling. Admiration is a word you could use, but it's like striving to do something that that same person had done.
Mm-hmm.
So it's fighting some like going up against her, someone that I was like, what she's done is amazing. And now I'm going against her. It's like we're kind of battling for that position now.
Yeah.
I guess it's like to be, and she's done amazing things, not just her amateur title. I mean, she's done some amazing things like fighting on the Contender Series. She fought a good array of promotions and fought some really hard competition. So it's going against her now. It's like I want to take that step above her instead of being that position where like I want to do what she's done. Yeah. I want to move above her, which is not saying anything negative about her because I'm really bad at trash talk because I wish her the best, but I also want to win.
Hey, and I think that's completely fair.
I want to perform. I want to perform. That's a better word. If you go out and you perform, even if you don't win and you do your best, that's just as important as winning, as long as things come together the way they're supposed to.
There's like one thing not about Hilarie that I wanted to ask you. I might have to edit it and like bring it back to the front. But I think like we talk about the buildup so much, and we talk about what's next, what's next. And like for me, it's like just thinking about all that stuff constantly. Like after a while, like you could call that ambition, I guess. But for me, there's also a bad part of that starts to build up in me after a while. I start getting like that anxiety where it's like, like think about a grind. If you're not a fighter, like you're in that 9 to 5 job, right? And it's like, bam, you knock out a report, or you do a great presentation, or, you completely crush whatever it is that you do. And it's like, oh, wow. Like, I arrested 500 bad guys. Next year, I need to arrest 600, and then 700, and then 800, and then 900. And it's just kind of like the sad part about martial arts, I feel anyway, is like these are like individual journeys. Like every fight is an obstacle, and it's a journey, and it's an opportunity for you to learn more about yourself. What I don't like about martial arts, though, is while I see you guys build yourselves up like mentally, spiritually, physically, and then you don't get that result, and then you tear yourself down because you don't get that result. And I see it happen over and over and over again. And I'm just kind of like, there's kind of like a sick irony in that to me. And I'm just kind of like, I understand that, this is like what you do and like you're an alpha. And I get that. But also at the same time, it's like, more importantly, you're a human being. And I don't like to see people like get so hard on themselves and like tear themselves down in the process. So with all that crap being said, I think being able to like decompartmentalize, I think that's really, really important. And I wanted to know, like, what are some of the things that you do to like decompress and to like reset yourself? I that's like a huge part. I think that not a lot of people really talk about, but I think it's critically important.
Yes. So I definitely agree with everything that you said. I feel like fighters, anyone in any profession at all, put more pressure on themselves most of the time than their higher ups or their coaches or anything like that. And most of the time that pressure is completely unnecessary. I know for me, like, it's like, I'm like, oh, I want to make it to the UFC, so this is what I have to do to get there. But if I wasn't so concerned about it and had that pressure on myself, I would just be doing what I want to do. And that's where true growth happens. It's when you're under pressure the whole time, there's only so much you can do in this space versus you allow yourself freedom. You have so much more space to grow and become better in all regards. So in terms of what I do to reset, probably not much. I am a heavy duty napper.
Okay.
So like that's my thing.
Okay.
And then talk all the time. I love food. Food is like my thing. It's really hard. It is really hard. So after the fight, the food is my big reset. I get a week where I'm like, you can eat one bad meal every day. And I'm like, yes.
Perfect.
Best
But you know, I think everyone needs to like find their thing, whatever it is, whether you hike in the woods or whether, you know, you chow down on some breakfast cereals. That's super important, right? Like people need to be able to do that. And one of the things I always like, it's a very daddish thing for me to say, but I say it anyway. And it's just like, are you having fun doing this? Like, because if you're not, if you aren't enjoying yourself, like I understand. I'm not trying to infer that camps need to be fun. They're far from that. Weight cuts aren't fun. There's so many parts of like what you do that's completely
less fun
and mentally taxing. I get that. But like when you finally have earned the right to like make that walk and actually compete, it's like, are you having fun? Like, are you enjoying yourself? Part. Like, because if you're not, if you lose that and you lose that love for it, and it's like, well, then like, why are you doing this? And I think, you know, it's sad to see sometimes, but you see certain people that have worked so hard and climbed the ropes, they finally get there, but their like joy and love for something has kind of evaporated and just kind of becomes a job.
Yeah. And so I guess I lied. During camp, there are things that I do. I actually see a therapist once a week who it's obviously there's more to it than just like, tell me how you feel and all of these things. It's kind of like just that safe place to be like, I was working with this training partner and they did this and it really made me mad. And they did this and I didn't know how to respond because I was so frustrated. And to have that there, I think really does help with that reset because it takes you from being high up and stressed and anxious to being like, it's okay to have these feelings. It's okay to be upset. That's normal. So that has actually made a world of difference for me. I started doing that maybe 6 months ago or so, and that really changed a lot for me.
One thing that I would say from my experience in therapy as well is like, it really helped me be more self-conscious about like identifying what was bothering me. Because right, there are so many things that happen and then you react, right? Like one way or another, whether you get like, you know, crushing depression out of it or a lot of anxiety, but you're not really like thinking about it. It's just all of a sudden, like if you're not identifying what the issues are and trying to think through them, all of a sudden it's just like water that keeps going into that cup and that cup starts overflowing, right? And then water's getting all over the place. And that's kind of like what we're like as like humans. It's like there's only so much, there's only so much room and space in there. And you really have to like be conscious about like what you're putting into that cup. Right. So if there's not room for it in the cup, then you can't put it in there. And that's like an oversimplification, but that was one of the things that I worked on. It was like I looked at like that tap really closely and I'm like, okay, what's coming out of that tap and do I want that in my cup or not? Because there's only so much space in there. And having like being a lot more mindful of that has really, really helped me. But you're talking about something that I think is so critical. It's like identifying the things that really give you stress or anxiety or make you feel a certain way. And trying to understand and reframe what that issue is. And then what's helpful is like a good therapist will say like, okay, well, here are some options, right? So it's like, here's like, let's connect these dots together. And then here's some things that you could potentially do about it. And some things will work and some things won't. And that's just something you're going to have to figure out. But that was like, yeah, that's like a crash course of like 2 years of therapy. And from what I've learned, and it's been, I couldn't, the hardest part about it is walking through the door the first time, because you're just like, oh, Jesus, here we go. Right.
Lucky for me, it's all Zoom, so I don't even have to go.
There you go. Perfect.
I thought I was going to hate it. I was like, I'm going to hate having my appointments over Zoom. I like the face-to-face thing. But I feel like it's kept me more accountable, which seems weird. But it's like, I'm not going to send my therapist a message and be like, hey, I just don't feel like it today.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not like you'd be like, oh, my car broke down. I have a flat tire. Like, the excuses are much smaller. And I think that's for me, because a lot of times they're like, I'm in a bad mood. I don't want to do this. I really don't want to do this. But I'm like, I'm not going to send her a message and say I don't want to do it. So I'm going to do it.
Right.
And then I always feel better afterwards. And
yeah, exactly. And, I think that it's like so important for people to be like aware of this and to know that, listen, like, if you're like an amateur fighter out there and you're like listening to this, like understand how normal and common it is for people like Glory to like get help in this department. It's actually quite normal. And I think almost every high level fighter that I talk to at some point or another has gone down this path for, to get to a better level of understanding about themselves. I think that's so important.
Yeah, I've seen the therapist I see now, and then I saw a sports psychologist as well. That was quite a few, or a year, 2 years back. But the mental, like I was saying early on, the mental side is the harder part for me. And I think majority of the time, the mental side is the hardest part for any fighter. I was actually talking with a coach yesterday, and he was saying, he's like, any single person in this room can learn how to be a kickboxer, but whether or not they have the mental fortitude and the heart to be able to be a fighter is a completely different story. And that's the mental stuff is just huge. And whether it's therapy or a best friend that you just rant and rave to or whatever, having someone there, or even if you can find that within yourself, some people can, some people can't. It's the mental side is just way too important to neglect.
I couldn't agree with you more. Let's pivot back really quickly before I let you go. It's a huge fight. You're fighting Hilarie Rose here in a couple weeks. I'm not going to go into all of it about why Hilarie's great, but watch her fights. And I think if most people watch her fights, they may not always see the result that goes in her favor, but she's had some really close calls. She's been on the rough end of some decisions. She was inches away from getting the strawweight title for CFFC when she fought Elise Reed. A very gifted, a very talented fighter. This is a huge test for you. And like now here we are only a couple weeks out. Podcasters are kind of like tattooers, right? I talked to you about this. We're kind of assholes. Like 1 in 10 of us are likable. Like I totally get that.
You're definitely not the 1 in 10. You're definitely not the one.
I know. Thank you. Thank you. And then we look at it, right? And so if I'm a not so good podcaster, I'm going to look at this. I'm going to look at both of your backgrounds, and I'm going to be like, well, they fought in kickboxing once before, and Glory didn't win, right? And I kind of laugh when I hear that, because I'm just kind of like, that was basically like, I don't know if I'm allowed to say this. If I'm not allowed to say this, tell me and I'll cut it out. But it's like, that was basically like a spar. There was there weren't really any like long-term implications of it one way or another. Nobody was taking an L on their record that night. It was like an exhibition. It was a spar. I thought it was really more for the fans than anything, because you're not a kickboxer. You're a mixed martial artist. So who gives a shit, right?
Yep. So
I'm looking at that fight. It was 2 years ago. I don't really put a lot of stock into it. I don't, because it's a completely different dynamic. Your strategy is completely different, and your jiu-jitsu, your grappling, your clinch work, like, well, I guess you can clinch maybe a little bit, but it's like, it's completely different. So it's like, you're very limited in terms of like what you can do when you want to like execute a game plan. And when you like hear about people like really talk about that fight, I think everyone's always centered around the outcome and the result. And for me, I think what's more valuable for you is, well, I was able to get like real time. I could see her footwork. I know how hard she hits. Like, granted, I know you were probably in like 10-ounce gloves or whatever. But anyway, it's like you had a feel for her striking patterns. Like, you had that real cage time with her. And I'm sure that's probably something that you thought about. And like you look back on it now 2 years later. I don't really want to talk about the outcome. I don't think it matters. But what did you learn from that experience just sharing the cage with somebody at that level 2 years in the fight?
Yeah. So kind of like you said, so it was a last minute fight. I had an opponent booked that got COVID, so she had to pull out. So Hilarie, I want to say it was 10 days or maybe even less. Maybe it was 7 or 8. Anyway, and she was like, yeah, we'll do it. But short notice, we don't particularly want to do an MMA fight. Coach and I were like, that's cool. Coach actually asked me, he was like, so this is what we have for an option. If you want to fight on this card, we're not going to get another matchup. It's Hilarie Rose kickboxing or it's nothing. And he's like, I'm going to give you time to think about it, and then take it from there. And I kind of sat there for a second, and the thought was just, it's experience. It's experienced against an accomplished female that has good striking, that's not going to have a negative effect on my MMA record. And what is the downfall in doing it if I'm not looking to be a kickboxer?
Right.
So I was like, let's do it. So short notice, we did it. I didn't have to cut down as low because it was short notice. So I fought at 120, said 115, and that 5 pounds means a lot. So in terms of like fighting, the actual fight itself, I didn't change my game plan from what we originally were planning to do with the opponent because we didn't have time. Coach vaguely explained the rule set to me, but I also wasn't really sure. I'm like, I know I can't grapple, I can't shoot, and I can't ground and pounder. I know those are the important ones.
Right.
So, and going into that fight with the game plan that I had, it was significantly different. My original plan with the opponent before was to shoot. So I'm going into this and I'm like, I can't shoot. Make sure you don't shoot.
Right.
So, and the footwork was different. The footwork patterns are different in kickboxing, Muay Thai, all of those things. You take a step back, looks really bad. In MMA, you use your movement a lot more because the gloves are smaller and getting hit is a lot more effective.
Yeah.
So it looks bad in terms of the movement. But again, it was a sparring session more or less with higher stakes. But it just was the experience that really ultimately did it. And with it, I mean, I sparred against her. I kind of have a basic, or I fought against her. So I kind of have an idea of how she likes to throw her punches and her kicks and everything. But I'm not really hyper focused on that because she could sit there and be like, I beat her kickboxing once, I'm going to do it again. I'm not going to take her down. I'm just going to strike with her. Or she could say, I want to prove that I'm the best in every regard. So I'm going to shoot and I'm going to try to finish her on the ground. So and that will change the style of striking versus if she wants to just keep it standing. That style of striking is a little bit different. So it's more or less, I'm taking this brand new, knowing that she's punched me in the face before and we get to punch each other again.
There you go. This time with 4-ounce gloves, and it's going to be an MMA fight. I think that is critically important, right? Because it's like now all of a sudden things like level changing and takedowns and like your hip tosses, all the other cool ninja stuff that I know that you know how to do very, very well. It's like these all of a sudden become options. And there's MMA, you're a professional, nobody needs to explain to you what the rules are, and it's like, okay, well, I know what I can do, I know what's in bounds and what's out of bounds, I'm already pre-programmed for this, so that means less thinking and that means more flow, and I think that's critically important for you.
I 100% agree. I think it's going to be, before it was that like, make sure you don't do this, don't step out of this box, and now it's like, take the lid off, just go. And I am very excited. MMA is definitely has a special spot in my heart. I've done boxing sparring, I've done a kickboxing fight, and MMA just really has my heart.
Same. I should make a podcast about MMA.
What?
I
No, I
know.
don't. I
Am
don't
I am I
know.
not ready?
I don't know.
I'll take a quick kickboxing fight
Oh, but
instead.
yeah, you could try. It's great.
well,
It's
well
not. It's not.
Glory, I wanted to one final question here. You have been competing basically in front of your hometown with NEF for a bulk of your career. I know you had a couple fights outside of that as well. After this fight, there really are no more fights for them to make for you. This is kind of it. This is like the biggest shark that's out there. It's Hilarie Rose. Um, and I know like you're not the type of person to like really think too much ahead. I get that, but knowing there's a very real possibility this is like your last time fighting like in Maine, is that kind of like, I don't know, is that kind of like a weird thing to kind of like wrap your mind around?
A little bit. I try not to put too much on it because of the same thing. I don't want to have the thing we talked about earlier. I don't want to have that pressure. I don't want to sit here and be like, if I win this, then I'm probably not going to fight in Maine again and I'm going to get the call up or anything like that because there could be negative implications. And I also don't want to sit here and be like, if I lose this fight, then I'm probably done for the rest of my career. I'm not going to be able to do anything. So I don't want to think about it too much. But I mean, of course, everyone wants to or not everyone, I guess, fighters that have those goals want to get that call, want to do something with what, like, for their sacrifices, have some sort of what's the word? We used it already. Validation. Some like validation for your sacrifices. So of course we want that, but it's one step at a time. And right now, Hilarie Rose is my next step.
It is your next step. And I wanted to, before I let you go, one final question. And it's simply this. It's like, what do you want? Like for all these people that are coming in droves, you're going to have like, I don't know, it's gonna be like Guns N' Roses, right? Like Guns N' Roses show up and everyone fucking goes to the show. Oh, did you see what I just did? Guns N' Roses? Huh? That's pretty cool.
That's funny.
I didn't even intend to. But here we are. Like it's like Guns N' Roses is like showing up in your hometown. People are gonna like show they're coming for this fight. A lot of people are coming just for this fight. What for all those people that are like gonna be packing the stands and gonna want to watch you fight? Like, what are some of the things that you would want them to know ahead of time?
That this is what I love. This is what I like to do. The win is great. A loss sucks. But going out there and fighting and performing and getting punched in the face and punching someone else in the face it's what I love. And the support that I get for something so wild and crazy is absolutely, it's unparalleled. I can't compare it to anything. Like you have like your mom's your biggest cheerleader in school. They're like, you can do it. But having hundreds, thousands of people yelling that, you're like, wow, this is it. I've done something amazing. And so I guess I just want everyone to know that I appreciate them and it means a lot having them there.
Hey, perfect. And you have done amazing things. And you are an amazing human being, more importantly. And regardless of what happens, win or lose, what's most important, I think, is like, you know what? Like you went out there and you could say, like, no matter what happens, like, hey, I've always taken the hard path. I've always fought the toughest chicks. I've always tested myself. Not everyone could say that. You know, MMA, I hate to say it, it's my love, but I look around and I know who's trying to pad their records. I know who's taken the boxer's approach to this game. And I also know the people who are the real gangsters in MMA. Glory, you're certainly one of them. I know that you have a lot of people that work behind the scenes with you to make Team Watson what it is. So if there's people or special partners that you have that you'd like to talk about, I'd like you to have that chance before I let you go.
Okay. So I have first prelude with this, I have a list of sponsors that give me monetary or trade support that makes me able to do what I love every day. It's way too many for me to sit here and list them off. So when this interview gets posted, I'll make sure that I tag them in that so they're getting the credit that they deserve. And then in terms of training partners, coaches, everything like that, I travel quite a bit, but every single time that I travel, my head coach travels with me. Coach Chris Young out of Young's MMA has completely changed me as a person and has really made me grow as an athlete. As I mentioned, we travel a lot. We travel to a gym that's 10 minutes away. We travel to a gym that's 2 hours away, one that's 2.5 hours away. We go a lot of places, and every single person that we train with has so much value. Central Maine Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu has people out of there that have given me so much. A gym in Rumford is run by a brown belt and a wrestler who they have changed everything. My wrestling game is way better now.
All right.
And then let me think. I want to make sure I list all of the gyms because that's important. Titan Athletics is right close to me. So we've started training with them and everything. And that's great. I feel like there's one more. The Academy. I already kind of talked about them. Yeah. The Academy, I started training down there too. But ultimately, one of the most instrumental people in my career has been my head coach. And I actually spoke about him in an interview earlier this week. And I think he is the type of coach that every fighter would love to have because of the time and the investment he puts into his athletes. And it's allowed me the growth the way that I've grown, and I appreciate him more than words could ever describe. And I'm grateful for the ride. Everything I've done has just been great.
Glory, you are great, and I can't wait to see your fight. All of the information for Team Watson will be in the description for this video. I will work with you to make sure that we're able to put all those people in there. And the most important thing, the link and all the information about her fight will also be in the description. Make sure you check that out. By the time I actually post this up, I don't know, like you might be SOL if you haven't bought tickets yet, but make sure you do that ASAP because these things are going to go like hotcakes. Glory, thank you so much for your time. I look forward to having you back, and we'll do it again very, very soon.
Very soon, sooner than last time, yeah?
Sooner than last time, my friend.
Have a good one.